Hello, my name is Gerard McCutcheon. I work as a pig advisor for Teagasc based in Oak Park in Carlow. Today is the third day of our virtual pig week, and today we are going to do a virtual visit to a farm in County Cork. This farm is owned and run by Eugene and Ciarán Sheehan, rearing pigs from birth to slaughter. The reason that we've chosen to visit this farm, and we were most grateful to Eugene and Ciarán for their assistance and cooperation in this virtual tour, is that there have been a number of developments on the management of health and biosecurity, and also in the area of bioenergy that we feel are well worth sharing with the pig industry at large. I have never been to this farm, and I am your host today. And I look forward to doing this virtual visit and learning about what has happened on this farm over the past 6 to 7 years. So I welcome you and hope that if you have any questions, that you will use the Q&A box to type in any questions, and we will deal with them in our live questions and answers session at the end. Please stay with us as we learn about the developments that have happened on Eugene and Ciarán's farm over the past number of years.
Eugene Sheehan operates a pig and dairy farm near Mitchelstown in County Cork. His son Ciarán is studying agricultural science in University College Dublin at the moment and helps Eugene to run the farm. Pigs have been part of the Sheehan farm for over 40 years now, where they operate an integrated pig farm, and they're selling roughly 28 pigs per sow per year at the moment at about 112 kilos live weight at sale. They also produce feed on the home mill and have been doing so for a number of years. Using the Teagasc eProfit Monitor PigSys herd recording program, the Sheehans are able to track their performance, look at their production performance, and track their production costs on the farm. And using this, then they can benchmark themselves against national and European figures to see how their farm is performing against others. Always looking to improve performance on the farm, the Sheehans used their EPM figures to look at a few key areas that they might address on the farm. They identified 2 projects. These projects should be of interest to the broader sector, both here in Ireland and abroad. We all know feed costs are the big cost in pig production, accounting for about 70% of total production costs. Next come the non-feed costs, and of that you've got labour and repayments as the big ones. But after that, in third and fourth place, would come healthcare and energy costs. In 2019, on the Teagasc EPM report, we see that healthcare costs accounted for 14% of non-feed costs, while energy costs accounted for 9% of non-feed costs. These costs have always been significant on most farms, and with this in mind, the Sheehans decided to focus on these 2 areas for a couple of projects. First project you're about to hear about is looking at the whole area of biosecurity and reducing antibiotic usage on the farm. A project team was set up incorporating the Teagasc researchers, advisors, their PVP on the farm and the nutritionists. And together they looked at the whole area of biosecurity and antibiotic usage. Disease levels were high on the farm back in 2014, and the first step that was taken was to complete the University of Ghent survey on the BioCheck scoring tool, which scores your farm for biosecurity, both external and internal. The scoring tool identified a number of areas of weakness on the farm, and together with the project team, a plan was put in place and implemented by Eugene, Ciarán and the farm staff, which resulted in significant improvements on the farm, as you will hear later on from Ciarán. The second project that was identified was in the whole area of energy costs. As I mentioned earlier, energy costs in 2019 accounted for 9% of non-feed costs. So this was an area that was important to the Sheehans to look at. They looked at 2 areas by introducing 2 alternative renewable energy sources on the farm. The original source of energy was mains electrics for the lighting and diesel oil for the heating. Over the course of the last few years, the Sheehans have invested significantly in the installation of a biomass boiler and some solar panels on the farm. There were significant installation costs, but there also were significant benefits and reduced production costs as a result, and also a more sustainable use of energy was provided on the farm, as you will now hear. So what diseases were prevalent on the farm back in 2014?
back in 2014, we were positive for nearly everything. So we PORS, APP, mycoplasma, pneumonia, swine influenza, E. coli diarrhea, oedema, and meningitis.
Okay, so medication costs were high at the time. You were using a lot of medication.
We were using a heap of medication at the time, so medication costs were about €4,500 per month. Compared to now, they're absolutely nearly obsolete compared to back then. So they were. Now there's only €1,000 used in vaccinations back then, compared to the cost now is about €5,000 for vaccinations. So in hindsight, it kind of is cheaper, but for medication costs is a lot cheaper, but vaccinations are an awful lot cheaper. Also back then, we were medicating the creep. We had medication to creep and we had medication in the link, and they were pre-made in the link, and we were also given CTC to the weaner, and then we were also given CTC to the fats in the first 4 weeks.
Okay, and where did you hear about the BioCheck scoring tool?
So we heard about the BioCheck scoring tool from Teagasc Park, so we did the advisors.
Okay, and you got a project going. Who was involved in the project?
The people who were involved in the project were the Teagasc advisors and the researchers, nutritionists, the vet, and ourselves and some of the farm staff.
Very good. And so the BioCheck, it was a biosecurity scoring tool, so it kind of told you how to identify areas on the farm that needed addressing. So what did it identify? What area of weakness did it identify, and what did you change?
We changed, there was only one point of entry on the farm. We changed clothing inside the farm, so boots, etc. And everyone who came into the farm, or anyone who came into the farm, had to put on separate clothing provided by us in the farm, and foot baths were necessary. So foot baths on entrance to the farm and foot baths on entrance into the piggery. So there is. Also, we put up bird netting all around the farm, so especially where we're exposed all around the fats. And we also put up some rodent control. There was bait points put all around the middle of the piggery, especially where mice could be prevalent around. And then we also put a few bait points in the pig houses as well, in the installation. Also as well, reduced protein in all of the diets, especially in fats. Now the protein percentage is mainly 17% in most diets. Also our stocking density was changed. We also put in new housing, so we built extra weaner houses, and we also built an extra farm house. So this allowed us to have an extra week inside the farm house, so pigs were older when they were weaned, and also pigs also got more space when they moved into the weaner houses. And then also we changed the flow of animals, so all in, all out, no mixing of animals at all. We also had a clear washing and operation system, so when pigs were moved out of the farm house, the house was washed, left dry for 24 hours, and then disinfected. Same in the weaner house. Clear instructions are also around the units and doors. There's blackboards on every door to identify what age the pigs are, what happened inside the house, and any vaccinations to be given inside the house. Also, we reduced the use of antibiotics, and we used a greater amount of vaccines that are made available to us.
Okay. And what were the main impacts then of these measures down the line? So this was back in 2014. So what have you noticed? What have been the main
We've noticed now that we had much better pig health via the control of the respiratory and digestive problems and the meningitis. Also, we saw a greater reduction in the use of antibiotics, and we had a much greater use of antibiotics. Removed the zinc at therapeutic levels, and decreased the days of slaughter by about 2 weeks, and with no change in slaughter weights. So our slaughter weights are as consistent now as they were back in 2014. And our production costs also decreased by 9.3%, from about 166 kilos dead to about 150.
Before any work was done on this farm, a lot of information was gathered. Its health and welfare status was assessed, and this was done by following the sale pigs to the slaughterhouse and getting the veterinary examination on those pigs to see what could be learned in terms of diseases that were on the farm. Laboratory analysis and recordings of different clinical signs and lesions was also done on the farm, and all of this data was collected, collated, and analysed. The results were that the level of pleurisy on the farm was more than 20%. There was a high level of sudden deaths on the farm, and ear and flank biting was a common problem. Biosecurity is a term that we hear a lot about today. Biosecurity involves a lot of work and includes a lot of tasks that can be carried out on the farm. You really need to pay attention to the detail to make any improvements in biosecurity. Materials and equipment like soap, detergent, disinfectants, brushes, towels, and boot washers need to be available at all times and in the right place on the farm. Biosecurity is something that takes time to understand and to implement. Protocols should be available for all farm staff, for all visitors, and for anyone who is in involvement in the farm, so that everyone is aware of what measures are being taken on this farm and they can adhere to them. Protocols should be translated into appropriate languages for people who are working on the farm from non-English speaking countries, and use pictures when possible to simplify the message. Biosecurity is really a state of mind. It requires regular discussions and updating to ensure that what has been done in the farm is being done well, and improvements, if they can be made, will be made. Internal biosecurity is important. So we should look at the animal flow on the farm. And this slide shows us a picture of the farm. The yellow buildings are the buildings that were there before any refurbishment and development work was carried out on the farm. And you can see the dry sow house and the weaner house are there. Weaner house 6 and weaner house 7 and 8 and 8A are there to the right. And then the top 3 houses are fattening house 1, 2, and 3. The next slide shows these highlighted quite nicely, where the weaning is highlighted in red markings, the farrowing house is in blue, and the finishers are in green. And over to the left of all of the buildings, you can see a red dotted area, and this is the extension that was done to each of those houses to help improve the management and movement of animals in all sections on the farm. This slide shows us the old and the new system of production. In 2014, piglets were weaned at 28 days or 4 weeks of age. There was 5 weeks in the first stage weaner accommodation and 4 weeks in the second stage, which is the norm on a lot of farms in Ireland. And then there was 11 to 12 weeks finisher accommodation. After they extended the houses and refurbished the houses, the system changed. Because they had more farrowing accommodation, the piglets were weaned at 32 to 33 days of age, with a 2.5 week first stage weaner accommodation and 5 weeks second stage weaner accommodation. And again, the 11 weeks of finisher accommodation. More recently, in the last 2 to 3 months, the system now is a 1-stage weaner accommodation. So the pigs are weaned into the weaner accommodation and remain there for 8 weeks, and then they go into the finisher accommodation for 11 weeks. Some other details that should be noted are that data was used always to implement any decisions on this farm. And data can be collected and recorded on a lot of farms without huge levels of cost, but it's how you use that data then afterwards is what is important. So the weighing of pigs is a very important area. Some farms will weigh their pigs at weaning. A lot of farms don't, and it's an opportunity that really they should start to consider if they want to start to improve their performance on the farm. Weighing pigs then at different stages of growth is important, particularly where you're working with your nutritionist and your vet and your Teagasc advisor in order to see, can you improve the overall growth performance and profitability of your feed performance. So weighing pigs is important at various stages, or at least to have the facility to weigh pigs at different stages of growth is very important. The other area that's quite important is monitoring the temperature, room temperatures within houses. This can be done very simply by using a maximum minimum thermometer in rooms, and this will allow us to see the temperature fluctuations that occur within that house over a period of time. If it's 24 hours and you reset the maximum minimum thermometer, you can see what the temperature, the lowest and the highest temperature were over that period of time. And if you know that that fluctuation is quite small, well, then you're in a good place. If the fluctuation is high, it means that you may be causing problems because the temperature fluctuation is putting pigs under more pressure or more stress, and that may cause disease issues on the farm. On this farm, there are a number of changes that were made to the farming house. When we talk about biosecurity, one area that we're very, very conscious of is this area of all in, all out, which really means that any pigs that are moved in batches stay within those batches for their lifetime, that you don't mix pigs of different ages together, because the risk is that you may mix disease problems as well. So all in, all out means keeping batches of pigs of the same age within the same airspace on the farm. The other area that's very important, if you are to implement a proper all in, all out system on the farm, is to disinfect, power wash rather, disinfect the houses between batches properly. And that means that you power wash the house properly, you allow it dry, you disinfect the house properly, you allow that dry, and then you may move your pigs into the house. The greatest disinfectant is dry air and sunshine. And the sunshine is the disinfectant because of the ultraviolet light that is in sunshine. Dry air is very, very important in disinfecting houses and desiccating any bacterial problems that may carry over from one batch of pigs to the next. The balance floors were installed on this farm, and they have been highly effective in reducing piglet mortality on the farm. It is important on all farms to take time to adjust the environmental comfort of pigs, particularly in the farm house and in the first stage weaner houses, or in the weaner houses on this farm, as there is only one stage weaner accommodation on the farm. And the reason for that is that these are the most vulnerable pigs on the farm, the piglets and the weaner pigs. So it is important to look at pigs, see are they comfortable in their environment, and if they're not, what can we do to help improve that comfort? Because if they're not comfortable, if they look like they're cold, or if they're too hot, it will affect their performance. The other area, particularly in the farmhouse and in the early stages after weaning, is to keep the feed clean and fresh, because first and foremost, it's a very expensive feed, but secondly, the temperature within the house is quite high, 30 degrees or thereabouts in the weaner accommodation, and feed may go stale very, very quickly at those temperatures. So don't put too much feed in there to allow it go stale. Keep it fresh and replenish it. It is important to formulate diets correctly, particularly for very young pigs. First thing is to try and reduce the protein levels as much as possible, because high protein levels may cause digestive upsets in pigs and ultimately cause scar in those animals. On Eugene's farm, since they have improved the biosecurity and the management of their pigs, yes, they are weaning their pigs at 33 days now rather than at 28 days, so they have a stronger pig at weaning. But now they have no antibiotics in their diets, and they have no zinc oxide in their diets. And that has been achieved by improving the biosecurity on the farm and also looking at the nutritional elements of their diets. The longer lactation has allowed them wean a stronger pig, and they now wean their pigs into houses that have a lower stocking density. The use of environmental enrichment has greatly improved the welfare of the animals and reduced the level of fighting immediately after weaning. The smaller pigs are given extra care on this farm. And you can see in this slide, in the photograph to the right of the slide, the pigs are given extra comfort and a lying area, let's say, with warmer temperatures, so that they can be warmer in that section. They're also given more electrolytes and greater access to feed within these pens. As the pigs get bigger, we can see that their stocking density, or the floor area allowance, has been improved on the farm. You can see on the left hand side on this slide, the pigs are quite heavily stocked, and this was how they were stocked in 2014. In 2020, you can see the pigs are given extra heat within the pens. They're also given more floor area and greater access to water. The other area is that they have more light, where Perspex has been used in the buildings to allow natural light. This last slide shows that extra access to feed that has been allowed in the new situation. The old facility had much shorter feed troughs. They're both ad-lib feeding, but the newer system gives greater access to all pigs to feed at any time during the day. The older system probably restricted the more timid pigs from eating. That's just an overview of some of the things that have occurred in this farm. They're interesting, and all of the points have greatly improved the performance on this farm. We now look at other areas in relation to the energy management on the farm and the use of bioenergy and solar panels on the farm.
What was the original source of energy used on the farm, Ciarán?
It was mains for the lighting, and for the heating you were using diesel, and we were using oil diesel, so about 100 litres per week, so it was around.
Okay, so the costs of this original source, they were fairly high.
Fairly significant.
Yeah.
They were, yeah.
What made you look at the renewable alternatives then?
The cost was the main reason why we went to look at alternatives, reduce the costs of energy, and also to reduce the cost of heating the pigs, because the amount of diesel being used was unsustainable. So it was.
And what options did you look at?
We looked at biomass and for the heat, and the reason why we looked at the biomass for the heat was because it was accessible to get timber all around, and timber was also a lot cheaper than diesel, and then we also know that it was carbon neutral. So, and then for the energy, we used so what we got, we first went to go with a wind turbine, but unfortunately with planning permission we could not get it, and so then we went ahead and we went with solar panels, and that seemed to work fairly well for us for the last 2 years. Planning permission was difficult to get, but we were able to.
But you got it anyway. Yeah. And so tell us a bit about the biomass option. What does it entail? What did you install? And so on?
So we first in 2010 we installed 150 kilowatt boiler, but this came from Germany. There was no manufacturer that made a biomass boiler in Ireland. The boiler worked well, but had a lot of problems, and anytime there was a problem, there was no one there to fix it on time, so we're still fairly reliant on the diesel. So that lasted about 2014 or 2016, and the last 4 years prior to this year, prior to February 2020, this year we were using diesel kind of, and then after that, then this year we installed a 150 kilowatt biomass boiler from Woodco, and we sourced the wood from Quilta also. The wood costs about €10,000 per year, but there's also a grant available that will offsets the cost of the wood. So the grant is about €10,000 a year also.
Okay. That's through SEI.
SEI. Yeah.
Okay. And then the solar option, can you tell us a bit about that, number of panels, etc.?
So the solar panels were installed in 2018, around January 2018, and they were finished by about May 2018, but when all the installation and all the panels were up. So we installed about 100 kilowatts of panels, 320 of them, and they're installed 2 years. In 2018 they used 76,000 kilowatts. And we use about 96% or 99% of the energy produced, and in 2019 there was 72 kilowatts, produced. We will also use about 99%.
So what was the cost of installation?
Cost of installation was €90,000 including VAT, and there was an SEI event available about 30% of the cost of installation. The solar panel use is only viable to us if we use it all, and when it's available, it is not cost efficient to store the power at this current time.
Okay, and do you use any of the energy for the mill?
The majority of the energy is used for the mill, so basically grinding wheat, soya, barley, and maize.
Do you need to get planning permission for the panels?
Yeah, you need to get planning permission for solar panels, and it can be difficult, so it can be.
Took a while. Okay, and do you have to clean the panels, or are they self-cleaning?
The panels are self-cleaning, so they are.
So you don't have to clean those, okay. And what was the maximum level of solar panels that you would install? Would you go for more, or?
We would install another 100 kilowatts if the grants became available again. The grants are available now, but they're just more difficult to get.
Okay.
We noticed that in the last 4 years anyways, we had a reduced usage of 40% of energy. This was done by changing motors, more efficient motors, compared to 60% efficient motors, used 99% efficient motors, 3-phase motors. Also we took out fans in the fattening house, so we did, and this also reduced the amount of energy used.
I'm now joined by Barry Caslin, who is the Bioenergy Specialist in Teagasc. Barry has been the Bioenergy Specialist in Teagasc for the last 14 years and is a source of great information on the whole area of bioenergy and the topics that we want to discuss. Barry, we're going to concentrate on bioenergy and biomass boilers and on solar panels. And that really is because they're relevant and present on Eugene's farm. So may I start on the bioenergy side of things and just ask you what grants are available for the installation of a biomass boiler?
Thanks very much, Gerard, for having me. And I just say that there's pig units have large demands for heating, ventilation, and for lighting, and systems are very intensive. And very often the power costs are overlooked with a greater drive for productivity. And I really think that a greater emphasis needs to be put on energy efficiency, and that should always be the number one fuel on pig units. So improving the performance of buildings and systems are the first steps, really. But yeah, heating is, you could look at all the different areas of heating and lighting and all of that, but heating is really a big area at the moment. And I suppose there's no point in wasting heat either. I think we should look at insulation of pig units before you go down the whole area of heating, because there's no point in putting heat into a unit that's leaky or is wasting heat. And there's a lot of waste of whether it's renewable heat or whether it's fossil fuel generated heat, and you're trying to minimize all of that. But on the whole area of heating, I suppose the big thing that has come in since June of 2019 is the support scheme for renewable heat, and that's really creating a demand for information for the whole area of biomass systems on pig units, poultry units, horticultural units. And it does make a lot of sense. There's loads of different technologies that you could look at out there, whether it's heat pumps, biomass boilers for generating the heat, but and there's different types of systems within all of those as well. The whole area of anaerobic digestion, generating heat, also gets a lot of attention within the pig section as well, because you have a continuous supply of material of a slurry to go through a digester all year round. But in the case of the support scheme for renewable heat, there's grant aid there for 15 years for farmers to install a biomass boiler. So it's a guaranteed payment over that period of time. Like, a lot of units could really make a payback in probably close to 5 or 6 years without any SSRH. So the SSRH brings the payback of a biomass system under 5 years. And that's why it's capturing a lot of attention at the moment.
Okay. And from a pig farmer's point of view, Barry, why would you encourage a pig farmer to put in a biomass boiler if they're currently using fossil fuels?
Yeah, I suppose, look, it's an opportunity to generate an income through a government incentive, because really you're a lot of your money goes out on, I suppose, energy every year, and especially on the whole area of heating, so within farrowing units. And you're making use of on-farm resources, maybe from maybe straw, maybe it could be an energy crop, it could be forest wood chip, or pellets, and that can be used to generate heat on your farm. So the energy can be generated and can be used to generate an additional income as well on many farms. But it's a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions also, because I think we're all aware of it now at the moment that we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions within the various sectors within agriculture. And by using a fossil fuel like coal or like oil or gas, there's carbon associated, locked up carbon there for millions of years. Whereas if you're using a wood fuel or straw as a biomass fuel, or an energy crop, that crop has taken carbon out of the atmosphere in the last year, in the last 10 years, 20, 40 years. So that's modern carbon versus ancient carbon. So it's a good news story for the environment as well. But I suppose the big saving is cost, because those fossil fuels are going to go up and up in price. We're at a record low, Gerard, in terms of fossil fuel prices globally at present, but it won't stay that way. And you will see carbon taxes being applied to fossil fuels, such as coal, oil and gas. And the cost will rise to deter us from using those. But we have to be able to switch to renewables that, I suppose, work for us and that we know are proven to work. And I think these biomass technologies have been proven to work, all across Europe. If you look at pig units in Denmark and Germany, so many of them are using renewable technologies to generate their heat and their electricity at the moment. So I think that's a real driver for it.
So at the starting point, Barry, if I'm a pig farmer out there and I'm using diesel or kerosene at the moment, how do I know what size my boiler is and what size I would have to replace it with a biomass boiler if I go that route?
Yeah, I suppose you can look at what you're using at the moment. You can convert. Say we'll take an example there of heating oil or kerosene. If you're using that as a heating source, you can calculate the number of liters that you're using and multiply it by the kilowatt hours of energy that's in that unit of oil. So if you take oil, 1 liter of kerosene would have about 10.5 kilowatt hours of energy per liter. So you can calculate it on that basis then that what size of a boiler that you'd need and the running hours of that boiler that you'd have it running for the year. So there's 8,760 hours in the year. So if you take it as it's going to be running for 4,000 hours in the year, you divide the hours that it's going to be running by the kilowatts of energy of heat that you're going to need over time, and that is to size your boiler. So it's a very, very simple calculation.
And can I ask you then, if a farmer put in a certain size of boiler, do you know the approximate capital investment cost that he would have to put forward as an investment?
Yeah, that question comes up a lot, and it's very, very difficult one to answer, Ger. I mean, you could be talking about anything from 30,000 euro maybe to 100,000 euro for the boiler itself. And it's like buying a car. You can buy a cheaper version, or you can buy the more expensive versions of cars. It's the same with the boiler, and many of them have bells and whistles on it, like that cost that bit more. It could be automatic flue cleaners. They can have automatic cleaning systems. So that can drive up the cost of the technology, and it just means that you have less work to do with it. You may have the stack height, and that'll determine how high you have to go with your stack, and that could add extra cost. You may have an existing building already on the farm where you can store pellets, maybe in a loft, but you may have to build a storage area. You may have to build a boiler house. So all of these costs will be in addition to it. So you could be talking about maybe an investment of maybe 100,000, maybe 150,000, depending on what you have to do on the farm. But just to be aware that you will have a cheaper fuel. Like oil at the moment is costing in the region of around, even at the current low prices, it's costing about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour for kerosene. Whereas wood chip at the moment can be bought in the region of maybe 3.5 to 4 cent per kilowatt hour. So it still is cheaper. And as I mentioned already, oil prices, LPG prices will increase. There will be carbon taxes going on that. So I think we have to look at the future as well and future-proof our businesses. And, looking at these type of technologies, I think they make sense. They're renewable. They tick a lot of the boxes for sustainability of pig systems in terms of we want to be able to market our pig across globally. And by using renewable systems, that's, I suppose, an added marketing advantage that we'd have.
The support scheme, Barry, you mentioned, the support scheme for renewable heat, SSRH as it's called, is available for 15 years. And so that means that the farmer is getting a payment for 15 years, which really subsidizes his fuel costs for that time period. So really for a farmer to invest in bioenergy at the moment, he is, let's say, getting a source of cheaper fuel, but also, let's say, it's allowing him invest in, as you say, a renewable energy and a new boiler. And from that perspective, it seems to be a win-win situation. Would you see any any negative factors involved in it?
I suppose the most important thing is that the system that goes in, that it's designed correctly, that's going to meet your needs. I think from a labour perspective, it's not an issue. It doesn't. Most of these systems don't require a huge labour input. But I suppose you do need to be cognizant of the fact that if you do put in a particular system, that's a question that you would ask the installer is, how much labor will it require? How much time will you have to spend with this boiler? What kind of maintenance is going to be required? Because there will be ash to be removed. A lot of that ash could be put onto, maybe onto some, if you're a tillage farmer, it could be put onto the land. Most of the ash can be actually spread back onto land and is a source of nutrient as well. But labour can be probably the biggest issue for a pig farmer, because there can be very busy units, and it's allocating the time to look after the pig unit, and the boiler system can be a tricky area. But I suppose fuel quality would be important as well. If you're using pellets, you want to make sure that they're the grade that you require them at. There's no inorganic material in your pellets. If you're sourcing wood chip, again, that is at the right moisture content that you require it at. If your boiler is sized and if it's on the spec to run at maybe 20% moisture or no more than 30% moisture, you don't want to be receiving chip at 45 or 50% moisture content. So they're the kind of the things that you are dealing with, additional deliveries onto your farm as well. And from a biosecurity perspective, you might want to locate the boiler outside the perimeter of your pig unit if you didn't want people going into your pig unit, and maybe to pipe the heat, maybe a few yards, and that's not an issue. There are systems there. There's district heat and piping where you can pipe. We've seen examples in Denmark where heat is piped for kilometers. But to probably pipe it within a couple of 100 meters of where your pig unit is wouldn't be a big issue.
So really, overall, let's say the system that you put in should be put in on the basis that there may be new technologies and new requirements that you have to factor in with the system, and you need to be aware of everything that's going to go on. But the potential that's there would be very positive in terms of the grant that is available for the SSRH scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes so much sense for poultry or for pig units to look at the whole area of the SSRH and biomass as a heat source, because going forward, and to be looking as well at where can I source wood pellets or wood chip? Can I lock in maybe on a contract basis with a supplier over a period of time? That could be an advantage as well, because that's always going to be the question. When all of these boilers go in right across the country, will the price of wood chip or wood pellets increase? And that's a real probability. And it probably would be good for the forestry sector, would be good for anyone growing energy crops. We want to see stable markets emerging there. But we know that the price of oil and gas is going to increase as well. So we see opportunities there for farmers to be self-suppliers as well. There could be an example where you have a pig unit that has maybe some acres of land that would be available maybe to grow an energy crop like the likes of willow, and that they could do their own heating on an annual basis, or maybe become a supplier to other units as well of renewable heat feedstocks.
Okay, Barry, can we switch now to the area of solar panels? And can I ask you, are there grants available for the installation of solar panels?
Yeah, there's grants available, George, through TAMS, the Targeted Agricultural Modernisation Scheme. So there's 40% grant aid available through that. You know, you're not limited to 11 kilowatts as you are in the dairy situation, but you can go up to, you know, over 20 kilowatts or more, depending on what the electricity demand is on site. So you have to show that you have a genuine need for that electricity to be generated on your farm to justify putting those panels up. A lot of farmers have already availed of it. One thing I would say is it's very important to find a good installer and look for information on the company and their reputation. I think the design of the system, the orientation and the tilt, they're the kind of questions that farmers need to be asking their suppliers. How is the equipment manufactured? You have to look at things like shading as well to make sure that the solar panels aren't being shaded by trees that's taking or mitigating the potential solar gain of those panels. You're looking at questions you'd also ask is the type of output, the energy and power output that you're going to get. What's the annual energy output per kilowatt of photovoltaic for the system? And that can vary depending on what technology that you have. You know, as a rough rule of thumb, for every kilowatt of PV, you could be getting anywhere between 750 and maybe 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy per year. So if you take your own dwelling house at home, you know, you might use 4,000 kilowatt hours of electricity every year to run for your kettle, for your TV, for your lights, all of that. You know, so a 4 kilowatt PV array potentially could meet all your domestic house requirement. But for a big unit, you could be talking about a 20 kilowatt, 25, it could be 30 kilowatt PV array is what could be needed. And the other thing you have to be aware of as well is, do you require battery as a backup? Because if you are oversizing your system and you want electricity at certain times of the day, when you're not, or maybe at nighttime, when you're not generating any renewable electricity to your PV array, you potentially could be drawing on that from your battery at night. So there's, you know, the installation and the costs, the timescales of the work. Do you require an inverter? And there's different types of inverters. You know, how durable is it? How big is the inverter? Generally, they're quite small. But you know, they're the type of questions. You know, the connection. Is there a possibility of connecting to the grid? Eventually, if we're allowed to connect to the grid, which is expected next year, Gerard, that we will be allowed to connect our renewable electricity systems to the national grid, and that'll be a game changer in terms of, you know, being up in the size and, you know, not just maybe using roof space, but maybe some other space within fields, because there could be ground mounted solar and you could be selling electricity to the grid, and that's the income generation potential on farms, that, you know, you have excess electricity being sold to the grid, and whatever you need yourself then you can utilize on site. And that kind of a situation, you wouldn't need any battery storage at all.
All right, just in relation to installing solar panels on your farm, what planning issues are there, may I ask you?
Yeah, at the moment the planning is 50 kilowatt PV array is, if you go over 50 meters squared. 50 meters squared, so it's about 9 kilowatts of PV. Once you go over that, you're into planning territory. So I would recommend that everyone speak to their planning authority and see what is the current requirements. There is expectations that the planning requirements will change, that we'll be allowed to go for larger roof mounted solar PV displays, but at present that's where we're at.
And in terms of the payback for solar panels, do you have an approximate sort of time period as to when the investment will be covered by the actual return?
Yeah, like if you're getting, a young farmer will actually get a 60% grant, and that's, you know, your payback is, you know, and of course it depends on your electricity usage on site. So you wouldn't be oversizing these at present without any connection to the grid opportunities. But maybe in the future, that we could see all that changing, as I mentioned. But at present, you'd be sizing it to your current needs. You're probably purchasing electricity at maybe 18 cents per kilowatt hour. So, you could be looking at paybacks there of if you're offsetting that own self-consumption use, you could be talking about a payback there in maybe 4 years, 5 years. A young farmer who gets a 60% grant could be looking at a payback there maybe 3.5 years. So it all depends on electricity usage, and it depends on the orientation of the buildings, how good they will be at receiving the solar gain and converting that into renewable electricity. That'll vary from the site to the technology being used.
All right, just in relation to further information, if I'm a farmer out there considering this, where would you suggest that I go to get further information on both bioenergy and solar panels?
Yeah, you can go to the SEI website. SEI actually do provide some funding from time to time for SMEs, which pig units would be. There's funding there and they've had it last year for the likes of LED lighting. They've had funding there in the past for solar for SMEs, which is a possibility, and that's well worthwhile looking at. Also on the Teagasc website, we have a fact sheet on solar PV as well. That's worthwhile having a look at. If you just Google solar PV Teagasc fact sheet, you'll find that as well.
Okay. All right, listen, thank you very much for joining us today and answering all the questions there. Thank you. That was the background to Eugene's farm, and I'm now joined by the man himself. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us today. And there's a lot of questions have come in, and I'm going to put them through you. Now, time is our enemy, so stay with me on this, okay? The first question, just for clarity's sake, you're a very young-looking man to be 40 years in pig production. Just clarify that one for me, please.
We were in pigs for 20 years, Joe.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, lovely. The second question is, when you reduced your sow numbers, when you changed over, let's say, in terms of the antibiotic reduction, did you change your sow numbers, or are you at the same number of sows, 300 sows?
Still at the same number. Still the same number of sows.
You just increased the level of buildings that you have there. Okay. Next question, and there are a large number of questions here, so I'll go through them quite quickly. Did you think of depopulating your herd back in 2014, 2015? Ciarán, your son, described all the diseases that you had, and you were using an awful lot of medication at the time to control those diseases. Was depopulation an option for you?
Wasn't an option for us, Joe, because of the proximity to other pig farms.
Okay, right, okay. And in terms of the reduction of antibiotic usage, Ciarán mentions the amount of money that you're spending on antibiotics. Did you do it all in one go, or did you do it on a phased basis, reduce the level of antibiotics?
Or phased, all phased.
So you worked back from the heavier pigs back to lighter pigs. Yeah. And with the zinc oxide, was that done likewise? Was that a phased basis? Or?
No, that was just a split decision made to see will it work, and it just worked, so we stuck with it.
Okay. And I suppose that's a brave decision. I assume you had zinc oxide in your weaner diet only, and you just simply went in and took it out.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I did a lot of work with the nutritionist on this before we took it out.
Yeah.
Going down to low protein diets and different diets before we did this.
Yeah. So the nutritional input is critical if you're
critical, yeah, critical.
Yeah. From the biosecurity point of view, and we talked a lot about it in those presentations there, Eugene, what would you see as the main areas that have given you the benefit?
First of all, I think is keeping the buds out and the vermin, keeping the buds out and keep the vermin out. Very important. Don't believe anyone into your pig farm unless they are necessary to get them in, okay, right? And then thirdly, in moving pigs one way only, no bringing pigs back, all one way.
Okay. And when you say all one way, that means all in, all out in terms
all in, all out only.
Yeah.
No bringing pigs back.
Yeah. So a week's pig stays with that week's pigs. Each pig stays in that week, and they don't ever move opposite directions. Yeah. That's a message. Probably it's a difficult thing to do, Eugene, unless you have the accommodation specifically for your matched week's pigs.
Well, we had to increase accommodation to do this.
Yeah.
So basically, once we did that, a lot of problems disappeared.
Yeah. And with your weaner house, you increased the the farrowing house, you increased the number of farrowing places. What has that done for you in terms of, I know it's increased your weaning age, but the quality of your pig, are you a lot more confident about putting those pigs onto the diets a lot sooner?
If you went back 6 or 7 years ago, we were probably weaning pigs probably 7.5 kilos.
Right.
But now weaning pigs at 9 kilos.
Wow, okay. And you're weighing your pigs at weaning, Eugene?
Yeah, we are the pigs are weaning, yes.
Lovely. Okay. Do you have a hospital area, or is there a hospital area for each week's pigs?
We have no hospital area.
None.
The pigs that go into hospital should be euthanized when carrying disease, and normally when they go to the factory, then they get condemned, so it's a waste of time.
Okay. Next question is in relation to labour. From a labour perspective, given the situation of high disease levels to the situation now where it seems to be a lot more managed, is the labour input reduced as a result of that?
No, because we have to give the pigs more attention. When you're not using antibiotics, you must give the pigs more attention.
Okay. And just the last one then on that whole area of the movement of pigs, you've gone to a one-stage weaner accommodation now in the last couple of months on the farm.
Right.
What was the reason behind that, Eugene?
We always found pigs going to first stage for a couple of weeks and then going to second stage, they got a setback when you move them and it's stressing the pigs. So basically we find out that the pigs are in first come to second stage rooms for 8 weeks. We don't get that setback now and the pigs do much better, thrive much better.
Okay, lovely. We'll change to the bioenergy side, Eugene, and just to clarify, the biomass boiler, Ciarán explained that the cost of the wood chip that you're using is about 10,000 per year, and that's the SSRH grant that you receive that amount of money per year. So one is replacing the other. But obviously you had fuel costs in terms of kerosene before you put in the wood chip boiler.
The fuel cost before the wood chip boiler was about 25,000 euros per year.
Okay, 25,000. So effectively, let's say you're now, but you had the cost then, you had the capital cost of a biomass boiler then to put in, and
that's great.
And approximately how much is that?
Well, basically it costs 60,000 euros.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so 60,000. So for the investment of 60,000, you're getting, as I see it, you're getting free fuel for 15 years.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's a hard concept to grasp, but effectively that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, and in that, obviously, the wood chip is a cheaper fuel. Are you buying the timber locally and storing it for a period, and then chipping the timber yourself?
Yeah, we buy all our timber from Quilta.
Yeah.
And we store it and let it air dry for 12 months and we chip it in.
Okay.
It's the cheapest way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and the storage, so you have the storage then, Eugene, for 12 months wood chip then on site?
No, we say basically we have the timber has been air dried, so we chip 3 times a year.
Okay. Right.
We storage for about 80 tons of wood chip.
Okay, perfect. Then if we change to the solar panels, and the approximate cost on those, Eugene, was how much?
90,000 euros.
Okay. And Ciarán, your son, mentioned that the approximate savings is about what, 11,000?
11,000 a year roughly.
Okay, so you're
depends on the cost of your electricity. An average of 76,000 kilowatts a year, depends on the cost of your electricity.
Yeah. So for 100 kilowatt installation, you're getting about 76 kilowatt.
76,000 kilowatts, yeah.
Per year. Yeah. So, but let's say, are there any pitfalls that you would sort of suggest to people before they go the solar route?
If you can't use the power, don't put them in.
Okay.
Storage is very expensive. It's a very expensive way. You get no payback in storage.
Yeah. Okay. And from what Barry Caslin mentioned there, if there was a connection to the national grid, would you put in more panels?
Yes, that would be a total game changer.
Okay. And in relation to the solar panels, when we see the site overview, the solar panels are over the dairy buildings. Am I right in that?
That's correct. Yes.
Why did you make that call, or what's the
first of all, on pig roofs, as you know, pig vents are venting out here all day, and a lot of dust comes from pig farm. Okay, so panels tend to get more dirtier on a pig roof than on a dairy roof.
Okay. And do you have to clean the solar panels on the dairy roof?
No, they're self-cleaning panels.
Lovely. Eugene, believe it or not, we've come to the end of the questions, and thank you so much. I'm also looking at the clock here, so thank you sincerely to you and to Ciarán, your son, for helping us, let's say, understand what's going on in your farm, and for taking the time to be with us today, and also taking the time to help us prepare the presentations beforehand. So we greatly appreciate your sharing of knowledge, let's say, with the industry at large. So thank you for that one. I have a number of other thank yous to mention just before we leave our audience. I would like to say thank you to Alison Maloney and Eric Donald on the PR side of things, to Michelle Lavelle on the from Teagasc Connected, who is coordinating this. Also to everyone within the Pig Development Department, particularly Ciarán Carroll and Edgar Garcia Manzanilla, who have helped in the preparation of the presentations that we saw earlier. To Barry Coslin on the bioenergy side, and Barry is very good contact for people if they're interested in finding out more on the bioenergy side of things. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Orla Canan, who is in the background doing all of the coordination on the virtual week for us in the Pig Department this week. So a big thank you to Orla on that. And lastly, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for joining us today. I hope you have found it beneficial, and I hope that tomorrow you will join us for the last day, the fourth day of our virtual Pig Week, when we have Scott D talking to us on the whole area of disease risks from feed ingredients. So without further ado, I'd like to say goodbye and thank you all. Take care.